I will call to order the August 1st, 2022 Town Council meeting. If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up first is the approval of the memorandum of July 5th, 2022 regular Town Council meeting. A copy has been posted. Are there any questions from councilors? Otherwise, I would accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
First by Councilor Garrett, second by Councilor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of claims. Councilors, are there any questions regarding claims? I have some questions about claims, if that's all right. And I think more, Kelly, I think my questions about claims is more about process. So maybe we can, if we could walk through that real quick. So there's a couple of questions actually. So this is, I think the email I got was that department heads had until Friday the 22nd to submit their claims for this run. And then I think there was Cindy had input it on Monday or maybe Tuesday, and then it was an overnight process, and that caused a little bit of a delay there. My question is, can we just move that back a few days? Like instead of putting everybody kind of under the gun with department heads getting in by Friday the 22nd, like in this particular scenario, could we have just moved it back to like the Wednesday before? And then that way nobody's really under pressure and everybody has it when we need it?
Absolutely. We're just trying to capture as much as we can before the meeting, but yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that would be, helpful just because we'd be able to get it all a little bit earlier. And then the other question I had is about the way the claims are presented here. It's relatively straight. It's pretty straightforward, right? You get, the first one, 101 general account, administration, payroll fund, FICA, Medicare, payroll, and then an amount. The next one goes general account, administration, Chase Bank, office supplies, no description, $700. There's a lot of those that have the no description. My question is, number one, how do we get that information? And two, are we within the parameters of the State Board of Accounts for approving claims if we don't have descriptions for what we're approving?
Well, Brian Traylor had reached out. He had some questions this time. Actually, that one you're mentioning was the $700 one, was one of the ones he actually had mentioned. And I believe that one, I wouldn't have put it under office supplies. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but it doesn't fit under the office supply description. So that's, we need to change that. We as far as I'm aware of, we'll be just fine with the State Board of Accounts. They've just looked through everything. I would like, as we move forward, to make that, to maybe add, to try to put more things on there. That is not a very good description. But you can always reach out to us ahead of time and we'll get you anything, be it the invoices or any of that information you want ahead of time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it would be good to get, because like you look at this first page and the overwhelming majority of them have a significant amount of description. There's some, I had a vendor reach out to me last month saying, hey, gosh, we really would like to get this paid. And I noticed that they're on here without a description as well. But after having received a copy of their actual invoice, like it was very detailed. So I think just for clarity, like for the public too, to be able to, when they click on the links, to be able to have access to everything moving forward, likely would kind of alleviate questions that we would have too.
Well, I'm certainly all about transparency. So as we move forward, we can look at what we can do with that claims report. So it's not so general that you don't really know what you're looking at and approving. Yeah, $700 for office supplies is a bit alarming, and it's a round number, so.
Well,
it is-
Yeah, I mean, that was one too.
That was what prompted me to ask the question. Nice round number and no description. I was like, well, let's see what that was. It was just for the record for the counselors. It's window tinting for the conference room upstairs behind the administration wall. It used to be referred to as like the fish bowl before it was renovated. I don't know.
So would that fall under town hall renovation that we?
Well, that fund's empty. I mean, it's not a joke. That fund is empty, so we couldn't pull anything from there, even if it was appropriate to do so. Going to claims, though, I think one thing to note, it's one thing, I guess, for counselors to be able to ask extra detail on claims, but claims are also a part of the packet that's inclusive of public access, right? And just whatever we can do, that if a member from the public wants to do their own understanding of where money is being spent, I think it's, and I know you agree with this, just the more detail they get, they don't necessarily have the option of know who to call. Not that you want 50 people calling you, right? So the more detail we get on claims, so if someone in the public wants to go in and say, hey, what was approved last year, last month, last meeting, they have that detail too.
You know, and I know we have our own process, and every municipality has their own process. Whitestown actually on their claims has a hyperlink to each individual claim. You click on it, you get the invoice, you get everything. And I don't know how difficult that is to, you know, maybe we can talk to somebody over there and just see, but I mean, it's literally, it would have everything you have here. You click on it and they automatically get an invoice, the detail, when projects were completed, you know, the expense, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm absolutely open to anything like that, so I'll look into what Whitestown does.
It's really,
Anything to make it easier for all of you, but also for the public to be able to access.
Yeah.
Sure.
thank you.
Well, again, as I said before, Kelly, I appreciate all the work you're doing on this stuff. I know it's not easy, and I think this council would certainly support any type of staffing presentation specific to the finance department when you guys are able to do that. So,
I look forward to the next announced council meeting.
all right.
Keep saying that.
Any other questions on claims?
Make a motion to approve.
First by Councilor Trailer. I'll second that. President Plunkett, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks, Kelly. Next up is request to speak on agenda items. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we do not.
Next would be a mayor administration update. We have an update.
No, we do not.
Very good. Up next would then be town council update. Are there any updates from councilors?
So I've got I don't know if it's an update, maybe it's a rant, but I think everyone's getting used to these. So Zionsville was in the news a couple of weeks ago, I think. I love when Zionsville's in the news. Usually it's highlighting a great local citizen, a business, whatever. 3 different TV stations reached out, as well as local print media, because there were vendors that were not getting paid because we were not getting presented claims, because the financial system was not able to generate the claims. If you sort of, and they're ticked, like they should be ticked, right? I mean, they did the services they were contracted for. The town was just not able to cut the check because the claims are not being able to be produced. And claims, just anyone doesn't know, I mean, claims what we just approved are all the bills. They're the final bills before they get paid. They have to come through town council. So, you know, stepping back a little bit, we keep talking about this financial system, right? How do we get here? And the administration asked us to do a sole source award to a company called OpenGov for the entire financial system, as well as them doing the implementation based on what Westfield had done and had done successfully. And then they turned the old system off before the new system was turned on, which was a huge mistake. And we have struggled with all aspects of financial reporting claims ever since that happened. It's been the bane of my existence. Struggled so much that the town of Westfield came to our meeting and said, why did you do this? Like, we would have never recommended that you do this. And they took time out of their day to come say, you're not crazy. This is just not working. So we're sort of stuck in limbo land. And 4 months ago, the mayor stood up there right there and said she was going to do an update to this council, an executive session, which is not open to the public, and I would argue probably isn't legally allowed to have an executive session because you're just updating and the public should have a right to hear this as to what is going on. And since then, it has been radio silence. There's been no meeting, there's been no updates. I don't know what is going on. I've also been told that OpenGov is upset that we keep saying OpenGov in these meetings when we're complaining about not getting information from OpenGov. So if the mayor is not willing to give us an update, I would welcome OpenGov to come here and give us an update so that I can understand what went wrong. Is this a software problem? Is this an implementation problem? Is this a requirements problem? They were given bad requirements. I'm not going to use their name incorrectly if they aren't at fault. But I need someone to sort of stand up and figure out what's going on here. Because right now I feel like our financial system is that Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other and no one is owning this. So Councilor Plunkett, or I'm sorry, President Plunkett, you know, if OpenGov would like to, I would love to hear from them. Where are we at? When's it going to get fixed? What's going on? So that's rant number one. Switching gears to rant number two, which is we don't have a head of economic development as an employee right now. My understanding is that a contractor is running the economic development group right now. The optimist would say this is someone that's been put in a bridge role until a full-time employee can be found. The cynic would tell me this is the mayor's attempt to bypass, once again, the reorganization by putting a contractor in as a department head and therefore not being an employee. That department head is not subject to any sort of approval if they are removed. So I'm not sure which is which, but I expect there to be a full-time employee there, whether it is this contractor that becomes an employee or someone else as they go and do a search. So personally, I am just letting it be known that I'm giving it till the end of this quarter, the end of third quarter, to allow them to figure out what they're doing, allow the mayor to figure out who she's hiring. I fully acknowledge this council has no input in who she hires, but once that person is hired, this council, per the lawsuit that we had to go through, legally has the authority to approve or deny a request for termination, therefore allowing all department heads to operate in a manner that they feel free of political influence from one way or the other. If it keeps going on as a contractor, I'm just not going to approve that claim. So that person is not going to get paid. And I'm just letting them know now. I don't think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to do that now to that person or to that role. Let's hope they're just trying to do an executive search. But if they just keep going down that path, that's not what the budget was indicated. That's not the intent. The intent there is to have a full-term, full-time Zionsville employee, and I expect that by the end of the quarter. So those are my two rants for today. Thank you for the time.
I feel like that could have been worse.
Oh, wait.
All right. Up next, first item on new business, Safe Streets for All presentation. We have Mike Gorowski, County Engineer for Boone County Highway Department, to present on this. Mike? And anyone else who would like to join him, I guess? Councilors, your note, there's no official vote on this. I think we'll certainly communicate a little bit after the presentation, is talk about what our ideas are.
Yeah, I'm Nick Parr, Director of Highways of Boone County Highway Department. And this is Mike Grouse here, County Engineer. We've been working on various things with Safe Streets for All. Don't know how much effort and details you would like on that funding opportunity. Mike's been working on that significantly for a new opportunity for funding infrastructure and projects that definitely encourages collaboration between municipalities. It's funding that comes straight from the United States Department of Transportation, not through Indiana Department of Transportation. So it's a funding opportunity that was created as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and a substantial amount of money, a substantial amount of funds that can come to local agencies to do projects that have been part of a local road safety plan, for instance, that we're one of very few counties in Indiana, or very few agencies in Indiana that actually has a local road safety plan, has done in collaboration with the town and other municipalities in the county. So, you know, that's one piece of it, is having a plan in place. Another piece is having a collaboration, and I know Mike could go through, great detail on that. I think the high level detail that we want to talk about is, what's that collaboration look like? And with the 2022 budget, this council approved, offsetting some of the revenue stream, that's differentiated with the local roads and streets fund, that, due to the reorganization and the Government Modernization Act, how that impacted the local roads and streets. And this council has budgeted this year for $130,000 to be used on projects through that are within the rural area. And we've identified a project with the Safe Streets for All grant funding opportunity that we could use that revenue to leverage it at 80/20 and contribute with county dollars as well on a project that's within the rural area of Zionsville. So that's kind of the high level overview of what we're looking at. The specific intersection at 300 South and 975 East has primarily been an issue historically, with especially wintertime issues, concerns with the high level of traffic at that intersection, with the steep grade change coming from 421 to 975 East. And, that would be a good opportunity to work on this intersection. It's something that was identified in our corridor study. We collaborated with the town on that and the MPO to get federal dollars to do a corridor study on 146th Street. And, what we can do with that corridor study is use that as also another item to, reference with this application. So, Mike, you want to go into a little bit more on the SS4A, when it's due, and what that looks like?
Certainly. So as Nick was saying, this is a great opportunity. It's the first round of grant funding that's coming out. And we are well positioned through our past work between the county and town. So really, it's up to $150 million coming to Indiana. So we just want to make sure we're eligible for that. And as he said, we've identified projects that would be eligible. I think really, I don't want to bore everybody with the details too much. I realize there's a lot going on this evening. I guess our ask here today really is just a letter of commitment for a partnership to move forward with this grant application. And if we're awarded that, we'll partner on that in the future. So we'll find out in January. So applications are due September 15th. So by January, they expect to make those award announcements, and we can work out the details from there. But for now, that letter of commitment goes a long way in the scoring process as well. It gets back to communities. It's, our preparation for this. So it's really capitalizing on a lot of the work that was done prior to me being here. So just looking forward to make the most of that.
And that is, thank you for that. That's you talk about the $130,000. That's already in our budget. That we have historically identified as kind of a mismatch there anyway. Correct. So there'd be no change to our budget. It would just be actually identifying, well, not even identifying the project, just committing to continue that same budget type of process so that you guys could then use that money for the grant to get that match.
Correct. So from the county standpoint of taking all that 20% match, we don't have that ideal number yet. We don't know what that would look like. But if we could get that commitment of the $130,000 going forward through this process, the project could take 4 to 5 years, is my understanding, to actually get built by the time we get through preliminary engineering and right away. We were looking for that to continue so we can rely on those funds to help offset the costs of the project.
It's a 4 to 5 year project and we do the commitment and it's in the budget. When does the funding happen?
So
our funding, right? When do we write that $130,000 check? Does it just get escrowed somewhere for 4 or 5 years until the project's built?
We're going to have costs ongoing, but there would be some that we would be able to, that was something we were talking to the county attorney about and the county commissioners of how do we capture that and pay those invoices as they come in. There's going to be a lot less invoices at the beginning. And then of course, as we get to right away, the costs and the construction costs. So we would have to have a non-reverting fund, is my conversation that we've had with the county attorney, of be able to put that there, then pay the invoices as we were getting.
And that intersection today, I'm looking at it as a 4-way stop. What's the intent to turn it into a roundabout?
Ideally, a roundabout would be part of this process. We we would anticipate the cost to be submitted for the application because that's going to be the higher cost remedy to that intersection. There is significant challenges with that one. That's why it's been identified with the cemetery. It has to be avoided. You have to do the grade change that is on the east side. So you can't build a roundabout with that grade. So there's going to be some significant grade change that has to be worked into this project. And that's where the costs increase and makes it, some projects going to be very hard for just Boone County to take on its own. But also that's what this type of project is meant for. This type of funding is meant for these corridor type projects.
Got it. I always love projects that it's like where it's an accelerator, right? Our dollar is worth 4 federal dollars. So I appreciate you guys' diligence on that.
If there are no other questions from council, it sounds like we just need to, if anyone has an objection, certainly make it known. Otherwise, the next steps would just be for us to write a letter of support and commit to that moving forward just verbally. It's not like we have an ordinance or anything there.
Does that come from the council, from the administration, from both?
I think it comes from both, right? Because the administration has to agree to this also.
We've spoken with the mayor and we were directed to kind of have conversations with both. And that's why we came here. To get on the agenda. So yes, it's my understanding. So we've been working with Lance. Lance is a great partner working with the town. Historically, we've worked very well together on numerous projects throughout the years, and we don't anticipate that being any different on this one.
Is this something that we're gonna have to budget for 2023, another 130,000? Is they ask every year 130,000? Or is it just for this 130 to do the 80-20 match for that project and that's it?
It would be ongoing. But this, ever since the reorganization, this has been the case where we've had a slight mismatch in dollars here, correct?
Yeah, so
That's what this whole.
the local roads and streets formula gives credit to the town for all the road miles in the rural area due to the population. It's an interesting formula that's come up with just in local roads and streets, not so much in MVH. That the town gets all the credit for the people on those roads, even though the county actually maintains them. And that number was 130,000 in 2019 when we did the initial look at the population credit, and the change when the special census was done and the Government Modernization Act and all that effect happened with Perry and the Union Township. And that impact to our local roads and streets actually dropped to $130,000 because of the switch in the population credit going to Zionsville for roads that we maintain.
This letter, though, I think to build on your question, Craig, this letter, though, is just a one-time thing. Like those future obligations, well, it's good to have that partnership. We're not obligated every year to do it. It's good that we do it in the partnership, right? But this letter is not obligating us to it beyond this one request. Is that
So you've
a
already
correct statement?
You've already done it, I guess. So for this year, the funds have already been appropriated. Is my understanding.
The funds have been budgeted.
Budgeted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the funds have been budgeted for this year. We are asking for the future because this commitment, when we would get into the agreement with the DOT in order to be able to do this project, we have to be saying we're going to be able to fund it throughout, all the way through construction.
Got it.
And our ask is for that to continue throughout this project. Yes.
So it's like a 5-year commitment.
Got it. Okay.
Which we can commit for as long as we're in the seats. But
My
That's
concern,
right, yeah.
my concern is $130,000 goes to all the county roads. That's our portion that we give you in our budget for the county roads. You're asking us to focus $130,000 for 5 years on one intersection?
On one project in the rural area. So you're asking, does it go to all the roads? It goes in the roads to the rural area. So local roads and streets can be used. Local roads and streets funds are used they have to be used on roads and infrastructure. Yes.
But I guess the question is all of this money for 5 years going to one location?
In Zionsville.
In Zionsville, but there's a lot of rural roads in Zionsville, and that's my concern.
well, we're not
Am I missing something?
only spending 130,000. We're just making up a deficit
Right.
from an accounting deficit, if you will. So they're spending a lot more than $130,000 a year in Zionsville.
I get that. I just wondered if,
So in the past, what we would do is we would pick up the phone and we would call Nick and we would say, Nick, we've got this stretch of road that we need you to look at, right? We need you to, and we would, potentially steer some of that money over there. What this is saying is there's an intersection in the town of Zionsville that they've identified that we can essentially control where that money goes now, spend $650,000 over the next 5 years to improve an intersection that could cost $2.5 million.
So my concern is that enough to go to the county when there's so many other roads, I guess, if we're gonna do 130-year, sign a letter that we're gonna do that for 5 years. Is that enough for to go out to the rest of the county roads and I know the county's paying for those. Am I missing something? I guess you just explained it. Okay.
Well, no, I'm
I
just,
just don't want to focus all over $130,000 that we give to them
Yeah.
to spend on all of the other roads within Zionsville. That's
I just think you're doing a great job for them pitching for more money.
I live in a rural,
Let them ask for more money.
district. I don't want all the money that we, from the town of Zionsville to go to just one intersection.
Yeah, and to follow up a little bit, I think I'm following your question is, right now, there's probably triple that being spent just in rural Zionsville this year. But this $130,000 can be leveraged at 80/20. The money we spent so far this year, it's done. So you spend it and you get what you get. With this, you have a chance to leverage it. And the county is going to be likely spending more than $130,000 a year. I mean, just looking at the cost of everything increasing, of what we think a project like this would cost today, has gone up a lot from 2 years ago. So this $130,000 leveraged at 80/20, the county's also got to spend $130,000 a year leveraged at 80/20. That does maximize the amount we can bring back for a project. If we would just spend $130,000 a year, you spend $130,000 a year and it doesn't become an 80/20 matched.
That makes sense. No, I'm tracking. I just want to be able to fix all the roads that we can.
We agree. If we could get more, we'll take more anywhere we can get it.
Thank you.
Do you want to do like a motion and a vote on the letter?
I think we
Just-
probably could. Adam, would that make sense? Or should we just,
Yep. Yes, that would make sense.
yeah, and I think, I guess in that scenario, to Trailer's point, if we made a motion to commit for that 5-year window, whether we're here or not.
I think we can make a motion to commit in good faith for 5 years, because I don't know who's gonna be sitting in this seat
Yeah,
in a couple of years.
Right.
no, that's true. Yeah, I like that. I would make a motion to continue to partner with the Boone County Highway Department at $130,000 a year in good faith for the next 5 years, specific to the Safe Streets for All grant proposal.
Second.
Second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Up next is a consideration of an ordinance approving an amendment to the American Rescue Plan Act. This is ordinance 2022-11. I'm going to take off with this, and Adam, if I miss something, feel free to interrupt here. This is the amendment. So if you guys will recall, we had to put the ARPA ordinance in that identified where we were spending money specific to these stipends that we had done earlier in the year. And as we've always discussed, we wanted to come back and revisit that. This is amending that ordinance so that we can include the other folks that were identified by the administration as essential personnel. And that's essentially it, correct, Adam?
Yes, yeah, you have to have, the feds require for your ARPA funds, a plan that outlines all of your expenditures. To add them in, you have to just amend the plan, and that's what this ordinance does.
Yep. I know we've all talked about trying to get this done as quickly as possible now that we've got everything we needed. Should we all feel like this is appropriate, there certainly is an option to suspend the rules and move forward with this tonight. So with that, do you guys have any questions or anything that Adam or I could answer?
Craig, this is something you want to do, right?
Yeah, so I see the ARPA premium pay, the next item on the agenda. Is that coinciding with this?
Yeah. So this will be a 3-step, there'll be 3 parts to this, right? We have to amend the ordinance, the original ordinance. Then we have to, should we feel it appropriate, suspend the rules, take a motion again to approve everything on first reading. If that works, then we move to the additional appropriation resolution, which is the actual $129,000 that was published, and we would vote on that. And then should that go through, then the next step would be to consider the ordinance to amend the salary ordinance that includes this stipend as well, also with a potential motion to suspend the rules so that we can move forward with everything. So there's a lot of working parts there, but. Adam,
Well,
hopefully
certainly for
keeps it-
this, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-11. I'd like to ask to suspend the rules.
We got to
Gotta do one at a time.
Yeah, we got to go through the steps.
Okay,
So, yeah,
so I'll make a motion to approve 2020-11.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0 in favor, 0 opposed. At this point,
Yeah, I'd also like to make that motion on that same ordinance 2022-11, to suspend the rules and approve this.
we suspend the rules.
Just the motion to
Yep.
suspend the rules.
Suspend the
Suspend the
rules.
rules.
Yep.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Lastly,
Motion to approve additional appropriation resolution.
nope, a motion to adopt the ordinance on first reading.
I'm sorry, thank you. Motion to approve and adopt the ordinance on first reading.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All
Aye.
those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the additional appropriation resolution. We went through this, Adam. We talked about, this is just the amount of money that actually has to go through. Are there any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Just we have to have a public hearing
Yep.
before that, but you're good.
This is a public hearing, and I approve publication of notice of public hearing. At this point, I'll open the public hearing. If there's any members from the public who would like to speak, then I will close the public hearing. If there are no further discussions, I would accept a motion. Actually, I'm making a motion to approve the additional appropriation resolution for the ARPA premium pay.
I'll second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next step in this, just to maybe move it along, this is the consideration of an ordinance amending the 2022 salary ordinance. Again, as you guys will recall, I know Joe's here, can answer any questions. Joe, if I missed anything, maybe you just raise your hand or something. But this is just adding that additional the appropriation amount, the stipend amount for the ARPA to the salary ordinance. Perfect. Do you guys have any questions about that?
Nope.
I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 2022-12. Introduce the ordinance.
Second.
Second by Counselor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is motion to suspend the rules. I will make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Lastly, I will make a motion to adopt the ordinance 2022-12 on first reading.
Second.
Second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Appreciate your patience on that. We are going to have a ton of stuff to sign as it comes down the pipe.
You need to take a breath.
Yeah.
Sound like an auctioneer.
Yeah, I feel like one. Up next is a consideration of a school zone ordinance for Trailside Elementary School. Lance, I believe you're going to take this.
With the opening of the new elementary school on County Road 875, it is a recommendation of your engineering team. You establish a school zone reduction speed limit. Currently, the posted speed limit is 40 miles per hour. In talking with Chief Spears and getting his opinion on what he thought the lower speed should be, he threw out 30. That's kind of where we had landed. That's the exact same situation we have up on County Road 300 at Union, which is a 30-mile-an-hour school zone and a 40-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. You were provided a map. This new school zone will go from about the tennis center up to where the new school entrance drive has been built on County Road 875. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I believe you had a map provided to you, so I'm here for any questions.
School starts Thursday. Do we need to potentially go through another expedited process to get this in place by school start?
That'd be my recommendation. Yeah.
Got it.
The equipment is up and will be operational. This is an enforceability issue.
Got it. Makes sense to me.
You want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion for the consideration of a school zone ordinance 2022-13 in favor.
I'll second Alex Choi. So first by Counselor Garrett, second by Counselor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. I will make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Anybody want to bring that one home?
You're very specific on the wording. Maybe you should.
I guess I got the cheat sheet.
You do.
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-13 on first reading.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks, Lance. Up next is consideration of a bond ordinance authorizing bonds, Zionsville TIF EDC. This is for the Adler Apartments. This is a first reading. This is ordinance 2022-14. I have Heather James to present on this.
Hi, everyone. Heather James with Ice Miller. I'm bond counsel on this project. We also have folks from the developer team here, and we have the Crow team here as well. So if you have questions about the project itself or the financials, then those folks are here, and I'm happy to answer any legal questions that you have. Just so you're aware of what we've done thus far, the Redevelopment Commission has already met and adopted a resolution pledging TIF to the repayment of these bonds. The Economic Development Commission met this morning, held their public hearing, and adopted their approving resolution in which they recommended that the council pass the bond ordinance. The ordinance before you this evening has all of the maximum parameters for the bonds, describes the project, and as you mentioned, is on first reading. We're planning on coming back on August 15th for your final consideration of the ordinance. And you also have in front of you all of the substantially final forms of the bond documents, including the trust indenture, the financing agreement, bond purchase agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. This is a standard sort of developer-backed TIF bond. It's payable solely from TIF, very similar to the Appaloosa Crossing deal that you had earlier this year. And to the extent that the TIF is insufficient to pay the bonds, the developer simply does not get paid. So it really mitigates the risk on these sorts of deals.
Could it be helpful, I guess, to get a 3-minute overview of where this project is and like what the amount, the TIF that's being requested, and just kind of a general overview, at least for me.
Yes, members of the council, Matt Price, attorney for the development team. This is what we call the Hy-V Adler mixed use development. So this is the project immediately west of the Lowe's and south of Whitestown Parkway or Oak Street. It's basically straddles County Road 700, and the Adler Apartments component was a matter which received development plan approval from the Plan Commission earlier this year. And at the end of last year, you may recall that Hy-V made its announcement that it had identified the property east of 700 and south of Whitestown Parkway as the location for its new supermarket. And so they are under contract now to purchase all of the properties south of Whitestown Parkway and west of 700, and they're scheduled to be up for development plan approval on August 15th. And so this is what we call the first phase of that mixed use project. Much of the infrastructure serves both the Adler Apartments as well as providing the predicate infrastructure for the Hy-V supermarket as well. The total bond issuance is just under 5.7 million. Another unique aspect of this project, it's a little bit of Zionsville history, is this was a property that was originally in Whitestown proper. During an annexation lawsuit, the town settled that lawsuit and gave the conditioned upon the property owners of these parcels agreeing to be disannexed. One of the conditions of that disannexation was that the town continue the project agreement that was in place with the town of Whitestown, which contemplated the issuance of TIF bonds for the development. So we're kind of carrying that forward here.
Got it. Thanks. That's helpful, Matt.
Yep.
Matt, does this TIF district include the get-go also? Is that all in the same?
Yes, that's a great, it does in fact. And so it is generating increment today through the get-go. Yes.
Okay. Okay. This is it's a little bit more unique than initially considered, because it's I know we don't make it a practice to TIF residential, right? And then looking at the diagram of the district and seeing that it includes the Hy-Vee and the get-go, that it's
different.
it is different.
Yeah. Talk me into it, Matt.
Yeah, no, you're identifying the issue. We were, the word I would use is during the redevelop commission, we spent about a year in front of the redevelopment commission, and the word I would use is paused during those proceedings for precisely the issue you're saying. The two factors though that supported us going forward unanimously through the redevelopment commission was that we identified our commercial user as part of the mixed use development. That happened right at the end of 21 and was announced in January of this year. And the second one was the historical predicate, which is that we have the project agreement, and it was an element of the settlement reached with Whitestown. And so we're not doing anything inconsistent. In fact, what we're doing is completely contemplated under that project agreement that there'd be TIF bonds. But they wanted to, I think, inform that project agreement by knowing that we had a commercial component of our project in place up front. They wanted the full context of the development. And so that's what gave us the green light back in, we kind of knew we were in good shape in May, and then formally processed through the RDC back in June.
Matt, still thinking through history, was that piece of property also part of the successful argument for our reorganization with Perry Township? Was that a component to it, or was it just the de-annexation continuation of the Whitestown piece?
It was a separate matter apart from the Perry Township reorganization. It was a separate, I think, a separate item of litigation.
Got it. Okay.
And then each individual property owner signed a petition to be disannexed. And the RDC at that time, this dates all the way back to, I think, 2013, the RDC at that time essentially pulled all of the project agreement elements that had been approved by Whitestown and reapproved them in Zionsville, so that the property owners knew that they were going to be given the same economic treatment under the different jurisdiction. So they were basically asked to do that by the town of Zionsville at the time, and agreed to do that, to facilitate that settlement and provide the tax base in an area that Zionsville had long identified for commercial development.
Did we not TIF to wasn't Appaloosa Crossing the TIF? Wasn't there a multifamily component to that at one point, townhouse component to that, or was that separate out of the TIF?
I think, but I think they carved that
Mr.
out.
Price would
didn't they?
know.
Yeah, it is not included in that TIF, although I believe we have used TIF in a residential context to help pay for town hall with the apartment complex next door to us. But to your point, it was the matter that was vetted by the redevelopment commission, was help us see the full picture. At first, we were doing that just by showing projected or anticipated future development. The additional assurances that the RDC received was the actual identification of Hy-Vee, and then Hy-Vee has, I asked them to be here this evening. They had another commitment, but they could be here on the 15th. They are proceeding right along with their development approvals, look to close within 30 days of their August 15th meeting. and anticipate being under construction next year. And so the commercial component of the project looks not only viable, but it's progressing tangibly.
So just sort of for education purposes, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then tell me a bit of the next piece. In this case, or even in our next request here, you have a fallow piece of ground that a developer is looking to come in and put in, whether it's multifamily, whether it's retail, whatever it may be, office. To put that in, they have to put in infrastructure. So a bond is then issued that is then bought by the developer. The proceeds from that bond are then used to pay for that infrastructure, and the bond is paid back through the increment that is generated by within the TIF. At what point does the town see revenue from that process outside of new residents that would generate some income tax and, you know, some potential sales tax that would flow through, but the property tax component to it, where does that come in? And also, I think the schools in some cases aren't impacted because children in those apartments still receive the funding. Can you kind of just talk about the general financials of that, either one of you?
Right. So, okay. The way this bond is structured, it's anticipated that the new increment would be pledged for 25 years to repay the debt obligation. And then after that period of time, then all of the property taxes flow to the town of Zionsville. You're correct that under the school funding formula, they receive revenue as a result of any new students that are that arrive at school as a result of the new dwelling unit. And that's true on any residential development that generates school children. What is also that, and that's just for the $23 million new investment proposed by Adler. What has not been fully vetted or mature to present to you today is how the other 23 million that Hy-Vee will produce revenue from, how that will be spent. It's anticipated they will also have some development costs, but the precise parameters of that have not been set yet. So that could also allow more funds to flow through or be used for additional infrastructure as the parties determine, the council determines is appropriate.
And of course, it's only the increases in AV that are generated by this project on this parcel that's going to be pledged to the bonds. The base, everything that's in the base continues to flow through to the overlapping tax units.
And the base is just an empty field, right? So I guess my only concern, if we start going down this path considerably, is 25 years is a long, long time. And in that 25 years, you will have residents of this apartment complex that will be utilizing, you know, town services. They may need police or fire help. They may need, you know, they'll certainly use our roads. There'll be other components they use. What's the argument that says we aren't in the hole for 25 years and servicing those residents until suddenly there's a pop and that bond expires and then there's a big inflow, in which case, you know, but talk me through, I know this is not unusual, right? A lot of other communities do this. Carmel has done this a ton, so it's clearly successful. When do we start seeing monies outside and beyond the monies we're seeing today, right?
Right. So, I mean, there's a number of factors with regard to, for example, the Hy-Vee project includes a Wahlburgers. There'll be food and beverage taxes collected from that Wahlburgers. It's also, I think, with an eye towards a long-term return on the investment. When Zionsville, I believe, negotiated to say, we are willing to trade certain properties as being annexed in Whitestown in exchange for certain properties being disannexed, the idea was that though there were going to be incentives and development assistance to that property, that the long-term investment, like a Boone Village, like Creekside, that the long-term investment would inure to the benefit of the town. So yes, while we're spending increment to pay for infrastructure, we're also planning for the future so that when those bonds are retired, those monies are there, and we've developed those sites to their fullest potential. There are also some immediate benefits too to the area in the sense of there are road improvements being made to County Road 700 that this permits. There's an extension of a water line to the Hy-Vee site. There is a significant underground detention facility that Councilor Melton has been a party to those discussions that is being constructed on the Adler property that directly connects to the Hy-Vee drainage system. And then lastly, I would say one of the things that the town has done very well on this project globally is that the approvals for the Adler apartment component was something that was very significantly supported by the neighbors as being an element to that project that was more attractive to the adjoining residents in Royal Run as a kind of transitional residential use with very well accepted buffering. And so it's kind of there's been a lot of global planning with regard to these uses, the investment of these funds, and the long-term growth of the tax base.
I think it would be helpful to me, and we get 2 bites of this apple, so I'm inclined to move this down to the 15th. But if you think about the other economic benefits, it would be helpful for me to know them, because if I have a constituent who says, hey, great, we got these great new apartments, we're getting 2% AV, and like, well, that's going to be in 25 years, they're immediately going to jump to, well, all right, we get all the traffic, we get all the, I don't want to say crimes, it's probably not that much crime, but we get all the demand for services, and 25 years from now, we'll get the revenue. I appreciate long-term thinking, but that's really long-term. It would be helpful for me to understand, all right, if there's 400 new residents in here, I'm sure the apartment developers have done the math based on what they expect to charge for rent of, what's the average income of those people? How much are those outlots that have restaurants going to generate in food and beverage, just to get a general sense of a number to say, like, all right, if we're not capturing the AV, and I agree, there's benefits to that, right? There's also, I've had a lot of people excited that Hy-Vee is coming, right? It's a great location for Zionsville. What is the money that we're capturing to help offset some of those demand for services? I'd appreciate having that on the 15th just to get a general sense of what that is. As properties become more expensive, as grow in assessed value, I'm assuming that growth in assessed value is modeled into the bond repayment. Is there a scenario where the growth exceeds the demands of the bond, the AV then goes to a certain dollar amount, and therefore that overflow also is captured potentially to us?
Sure. To the extent that there's additional TIF that's generated in addition to what we're expecting, then the bonds can be paid off early.
Got it. So it just goes towards paying off the bonds. So 25 years becomes maybe 21, 22 years.
Right,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
And just so we're clear about the structure, right? Because I think these sorts of projects are attractive, and in order to incent developers to come into Zionsville, there's 2 sort of tools in your tool belt are typically TIF and tax abatement.
Mhm.
And this really functions like a tax abatement because it's such an efficient structure, with developer acting as both the developer and the bond purchaser. So really it functions like a long-term tax abatement where they're paying their taxes as the developer, but then they're getting them right back as the bond purchaser. So if you're comfortable with the concept of tax abatement, I think this really is very similar to that.
I'm not comfortable with the concept of tax abatement on an apartment complex. I like, if, the road splits the property between the residential and the commercial. If you come with just, this ask for the commercial side, that'd be a whole lot easier to swallow.
Right. I think the something that is part of this development is that, right, all of this infrastructure goes to both. So it's setting up for both phase 1 and phase 2.
So that's fair, but you're setting yourself up for then if phase 2 comes with a huge tax abatement request, that's backing us into a corner, right? Like, well, we can't do this project now. If we like, it would be better to get a sense of what the whole project abatement ask is, because if you're asking for 100% upfront for the residential and then saying that, abatement is going to cover some of the infrastructure for the commercial side. I would expect the commercial's not going to ask for nearly as much. They may then come and say, no, we do need as nearly as much because we have infrastructure above and beyond we didn't anticipate. So that's where it gets a little iffy. The tax abatement one, I think, is fair, but I would also tell you this council has done 10-year tax abatements that are on a graduated stair step, where we're starting to capture revenue in year 2. It goes from 100% to 95 to 80, 20, 80, 70, all the way down. So it's not a 25-year wait. It is a 2-year wait. So it's just a little bit of pause if we start doing project after project after project like this, and we're adding literally thousands of residents, but the revenue is not going to come for a long, long time. That can be a problem.
Well, I think that the developer team can put together the other economic benefits for you, and the Crow team can put together the financials to show you for the full project.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you to do that.
There's fees too that are generated here, right? Like road impact fees, sewer fees. I mean, unless those were waived through the RDC. I mean, those should all be included, I think, in whatever you present the next meeting too.
We can certainly do that. You're correct. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions for Matt or Heather?
If there's not, knowing it's coming back, I'll make a motion to approve the first reading of this TIF EDC request.
I'll second that. First by Counselor Garrett, second by Plunkett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Mr. President. Thank you. Up next is consideration of bond ordinance authorizing bonds in the TIF EDC. This is for the farm phase 1. This is also a first reading ordinance 2022-15. Heather, I believe you're up for this one too.
Hi again. Same structure, same timing, also developer bought. This one maybe is a little bit more familiar to you because we recently brought it through the TIF process to create the economic development area and then 2 allocation areas within that economic development area. So I think there was a presentation at that time about the project, but we do have, again, the developer team here to talk about the project if you so desire. I would say the difference here is that the pledge is not 100% of the TIF, it's 95. So 5% will be captured by the redevelopment commission and can be used for local public improvements on a pay-as-you-go basis.
So this is right by my house. My big interest in this one is sort of the ingress egress part along Sycamore. And I realized that the apartments, it's 400 apartments, but that won't justify a light. But when the second phase comes in, similar to the last one we just talked about, there will be a need for some sort of intersection there on Sycamore, which is just past the 421 Sycamore light. I would certainly, if the developer, if you guys want to talk about the idea of putting a roundabout there to get folks in or out, or what might be feasible, especially if you're thinking about the second phase. That's my biggest concern, I guess, is storing a lot of traffic on Sycamore and having to wait at another light because I hate that light at 421 Sycamore.
Okay, is that something that you want them to present on now or?
Either now or next meeting, whichever they're most comfortable in talking through what may be feasible or what they might be willing to talk through.
Okay.
Some visuals as well, if I can plug in.
Hello and good evening. For the record, my name is Steve Pittman. I'm here representing our family Pittman investors and also with Skinnell Properties. Our team here tonight is my brother Chad Pittman, my son Sam Pittman. We got Sean Hitchcock and Tom Jason with Skinnell.
And I think what we're going to try to do tonight is first, I'm going to introduce the project again. And I apologize, you guys have to hear this over and over and over. We've given it to many, many people, including the Chamber of Commerce, who's here tonight in support with Amanda Rubeck. But we know this stuff so well, sometimes we assume everyone else remembers this stuff, and sometimes you don't. So this first slide we have up here is a concept plan that Delve Architecture, we hired Delve Architecture. We were real impressed with the things that they did for you all, for the town, and asked them to get involved in our project. And to go back a little bit, this is a 50-acre project that was approved, one of the first mixed-use PUDs approved in Zionsville, and back in July of 2013. And we started to move forward in 14. We're derailed, and we're getting it going again. And it's interesting to look back at where we were and where we are now. One of the great things that has happened with that delay is everything's only gotten better. Many more rooftops, enhanced demographics. And if you look at the corridor of West Carmel and East Zionsville, and you look at Holiday Farms, you look at the demographics of what's up here, it really is becoming more and more interesting to a lot of people to be here. The other thing that was interesting when we started this process, and to go back to our PUD that was approved in 2013, that PUD called for up to 225,000 square feet of office and retail, and up to 400 apartment units. And I think another really interesting thing about that project, when that was approved at the end, we had no remonstrance. So to think of a town like Zionsville, that I have a lot of respect for, it's very unusual to go through that process. And it was just hours and hours and hours of meetings with neighborhood groups, and give a lot of credit to my brother Chad, who's a Zionsville resident, and interacted with people. So one thing I do, even though this is not a plan commission hearing, we're not bringing a controversial project to you. The other thing, about this project, when my brothers and I, as we move forward with phase 2 of the Pittman family and how we develop things, we wrote down goals for us of what's important about this project. And that's kind of why we picked these guys. So when I talked about our PUD, so we want everything we do out here to meet and exceed our PUD. So that was important to us. And this project, we believe, does that. Number 2, it was important to us when we talked with these guys, when they reviewed our PUD. And also, to take a step back, we talked to lots of multifamily developers to be our partners. And we're not selling this property. We're long-term partners and owners in this thing. At the time, back in 2014, nobody was thinking the way that these guys were thinking, and what the marketplace is now allowing us to do. And that's to put in a 400-unit parking garage, a very expensive parking garage, and one that allows us to actually fulfill the expectations of our PUD and actually have 400 units here in a smaller area to create an extremely high assessed value the town will benefit from for years to come. So, but part of that is previously when we looked at trying to maximize the multifamily component of this and the assessed valuation we could create, if you weren't going to have a parking garage here, you were going to get about 225 units on about half the site. And so we're getting this assessed valuation in a much tighter area with our parking garage. It's allowing us not only enhanced architecture, but allowing us to create and have incredible amenities that these guys can talk more about. Besides the enhanced architecture, we wanted something that we felt was transformational to the town. We wanted something that enhanced and improved our ability to pull off a world-class retail component. As I've talked to some of you, one of the most lucrative things a developer like us can do on the retail side of this is to do a long-term McDonald's land lease. Institutional investors want to buy those things all day long. We don't want to do that. We want to bring in very high-end restaurants that people used to think that had to happen downtown at the convention center, and now we've learned that you can do those in downtown Carmel. You can do those in downtown Fishers. It's tough to get those guys. It's not as lucrative, and they're seeing deals when I talk to them of, well, hey, Carmel's going to go buy this tract of land for $3 million for us and contribute this to the deal that we can go build this building. We're not expecting Zionsville to come out here and build a building for this is something the private sector is going to pull off. But the TIF allows this sort of thing to happen. Without the TIF, these sorts of things couldn't happen. And then we also wanted, as I said before, AV that exceeds the type of AV that we could get without a TIF, and that's the enhanced density. So when you look at this site, and so tonight we're only here to talk about phase one, but as I heard you say in the previous presentation, it's good for you guys to get a look at what the entire project could look like. And when you look at this, we're looking at it from Michigan Road, kind of an aerial. And so when we created this PUD, we had 4 areas. West of this project, we created what we call a state residential. And so that's property actually where Chad used to live. Since sold that property, but it was a way for us to justify the type of use and the type of density that we wanted to get here, is we're creating that upon ourselves. So, if it was going to be negative, it was going to be negative for us, and we wouldn't be doing something that was negative for us. But that's the far western edge of our property. We had you can see that in the area in kind of peach or orange color. The area in yellow is the Sycamore Road, what we're going to call professional office use block. We would anticipate seeing some office buildings. We would anticipate maybe seeing medical office. If you look not too far over and you looked at what we did at the bridges in Carmel, you start seeing Zotec, where they put in structured parking there. They want it to be by the retail uses. If you look right down the street, you also see the car headquarter building. That wasn't part of our development, but it feels like it was, and they wanted that be a component of a mixed use development where people could walk to things. The area along Michigan Road is our Michigan Road overlay. And then the middle area is what we call our central core district. How do I go back in? Okay. So, originally when we did this project, to the far left of the screen would be our main entryway off of Michigan Road that aligns with the entryway into the Presbyterian Church. As you go north, that next entryway you're seeing, that's a right in, right out. And as you go further north, you see Sycamore. The first entryway would be a right in, right out. And then the second entryway would be the main entryway of Sycamore. And that's the area that Josh wants us to address, of what kind of road enhancement can happen in that area. As we foresee the retail, and like I said, I'm talking about the retail because these guys will talk about the multifamily in phase one. We originally laid out an area there where we're showing a 60,000 square foot. What we were hoping was a grocery store. We don't have that grocery store. We hope to get that grocery store. These guys we think will help us get that grocery store. As you go across that parking lot over there, you see 2 restaurants. We'd like to see high-end restaurants. And what we're trying to do as a retail developer there and a mixed-use developer is actually tie these 2 developments together. What you really see a lot of times when people talk about mixed use, you see a guy coming in, putting in a strip center, and then you see a road coming in on the other side as an apartment complex. So we're literally trying to put that together where people are living in the apartments and they're walking across to the restaurants and vice versa. So there's a common area strip in there that we're using to try to enhance this area, create outdoor spaces. We want to create an area for people to hang out, performances, and we've asked these guys as well. While it's not part of the TIF, it was something that was important to us, was to play off the legacy that everybody here in Zionsville knows about, is where our red barns, where people got their pictures taken and everything else, that have the big Pittman Farm sign. And we're going to try to do something similar to that with kind of a barn pavilion that these guys can show you here in a minute. So when I show you this picture, the retail component of this is concept. The marketplace will be responding to the marketplace and trying to make things happen. The request tonight does not contemplate what we may or may not ask for in the TIF in phase 2, but the TIF in TIF in phase 2 could help us provide for and deal with the things that Mr. Garrett is talking about. This is just another blow up closer to the ground level of what you can see looking through there. This again shows the different districts that I discussed as part of our PUD.
Steve, real quick, That estate district is not in the TIF, correct?
Pardon me?
The estate home district is not in the TIF, correct?
is
'Cause
not.
that's just single family homes.
Correct. And when these guys start talking about phase one, they're going to show the area specifically in the TIF. Generally speaking, though, you'll see the areas in white there are the three buildings that will be what we're talking about in terms of the AV that we'll be bringing in. Oops. Space.
Is that the phase one? Those white buildings are all phase one?
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
correct. Okay, and this brings us now to the next part of our presentation, where Skinnell will talk about specifically about phase one, and they'll have the ability to go into the most minute detail that you guys can want tonight.
We'll only do that if you ask, I promise. I know you have a lot on your agenda. So Sean Hitchcock, Director with Skinnell Properties, 8801 River Crossing Boulevard, Suite 300. Appreciate the time tonight. We'll go pretty quickly through this, but we're willing to stop and as you say, get into detail wherever you guys would like tonight. I did want to give a quick flyover of just what is comprised of phase one of this project. Steve did a great job articulating the overall vision, as realized within the PUD. Our hope here tonight through this first series of bond issuance at 95% is to really begin the construction and the momentum and the flywheel in phase one of this project. So phase one is comprised really of two main portions. First of all is the infrastructure that feeds the entire site. So infrastructure being the main thoroughfare and road, all utility mains to feed the entirety of the site, stormwater drainage, landscaping along that road, sidewalks, etc. The second portion, again, that Steve alluded to, are the three white buildings that you see, which are the 400 multifamily units, 1 to 3 bedroom apartments, 405 stall parking garage, 250 surface stalls. We'll show some pictures here of the kind of community pavilion. It's kind of down by the retention pond. That's the stormwater retention. Again, size for the entire 46 acres of the site. And as well as all this, certainly, landscaping, courtyards, et cetera. So kind of everything you see that's not shaded is what we're proposing for phase one today.
So Sean, I look at that, go back one slide. And again, I know you get to my point, but on your internal infrastructure that I'm paying for through this TIF, you have a roundabout. I want that roundabout. I want a roundabout, not that roundabout, on the public side of it that should have been revenue captured in for the town, right? And I think so. I don't need an answer now, but I'm just, by the time this conversation is over, I'm looking for some sort of general conception there of clearly roundabouts are a good idea. I get asked about them all the time, and you've got it here in your own design plan. I want to make sure that we are benefiting the overall community with that same type of perceived design improvement that probably eats up a little bit of this ground and maybe eats up a little bit of the neighbors to the north ground, so that everyone that is impacted by the traffic of the 400 residents coming and going from this site can just be a little bit smoother.
Understood. Yeah, so a little bit, maybe just to hit on that, is where we are today. So a traffic study was performed a few months ago. It's been submitted to NDOT because certainly they have a jurisdictional authority as well on US 421. So we've been waiting on feedback from them. We've had a meeting. We're in our development plan approval process now. We've had meetings with Lance and staff as well to discuss different traffic solutions and management methods along Sycamore. The multifamily piece, this isn't us kicking the can, but as you alluded to earlier, the multifamily piece doesn't warrant a signal at either location to start. That warrant is somewhere, we say north of 50% of the commercial development. We're thinking that somewhere around 75% of the commercial development when that warrant would be triggered. There's a lot of speculation in that different commercial uses warrant different traffic patterns, correct? So a medical office building is different than a grocery store. And so that's just a general kind of sense of how far would we need to get before these signal warrants or traffic control warrants, around about being another side of the same coin, right? A traffic management kind of system, an engineered system would be in place.
Yeah.
We're not into the engineering or the planning up yet. I think we're all committed to a solution at Sycamore and continue those conversations with the town and contributing to that, whether that be a roundabout or a signal. Is that correct, Steve? Is that fair to say? And again, I think we need it to work and function and flow smoothly for the development. And we certainly need that to happen for the town as well. The last thing we want is a development that creates further hazards and further traffic backups than what are there. And so there's a commitment to that. we've got a lot of engineering and planning to do. We know that phase one is really the genesis to, again, install the infrastructure that allows, it's kind of the hook to hopefully lure the great retail that Steve needs in the market. So it's the AV generated by the apartments that essentially installs the infrastructure and the drainage and uses as little site as possible, to Steve's point, and develops the harder part of that site that hopefully then by the time that goes, we kind of advance those conversations to the front end. Instead of waiting till phase two was designed and this was happening, we got the traffic study done. We're in engineering on solutions now, but we need to get into what those look like and what those sizes would be and how a roundabout might work. But we're committed to having those conversations and looking for that solution with the town.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And it's sort of like the last project we just talked about, where it is two phases, where residential isn't on the front end, the commercial's on the back end. Candidly, I think we're more interested in the commercial if you think about it from an AV standpoint. However, as you're going down this design, sort of being on record and knowing this is something, I can't speak to the other councilors, but something that is important to me, what I think would be problematic is if you come up with a design that just anticipates a signal there through other land uses. In other words, buildings going up by saying, well, the buildings are up, we really can't put a roundabout in now. You're going to see pushback from me on the second phase if that really isn't thought through. So just as long as you're thinking about it now and committed to through a second TIF that I'm sure we'll see at some point when the commercial piece is coming, as well as input from Mr. Lance on what he thinks is feasible. I just want to make sure we're having that conversation versus backing ourselves into a corner where a signal is the only thing that is feasible because of designs that have been previously done. And that I think would be a miss for the residents impacted.
Understood. Yeah. And if you see our design, this first phase is really set off of Sycamore. Their commercial parcels are phase two are up against there. So none of those are designed where they wouldn't be impactful to the current phase in the apartment construction. So I'll zip through the rest of this. Stop me if you guys want to see more in any more detail. This is a good isometric of the three buildings just to kind of get a sense. Again, to Steve's point, I think we've said this before. We believe this is a generational site. This is probably one of the most important corners any of us will ever work on. Zionsville resident, we're trying to steward this really well, and that we need this to be great. The worst thing we could do is put 15-year product on a 50-year site. And so we need to do this in a way that's above and beyond. That's some of the best product that we're shooting to install and hopefully in really central Indiana. We'll go back to that. We've talked a little about this community pavilion. If you look below, so this is kind of down overlooking the pond as part of phase one. Again, this is to harken back to the Pittman Farms barn, where we all probably illegally had our senior pictures taken at one time or another. But again, the thought here is that we really like the intersection in the collision moments between our residents and the general public to have an open pavilion here with fire pit, ping pong tables. It's beautiful down in this site. Once you get in the back corner, you can't even see it. There's about 60 feet of topography. And so as we get, what we're trying to do is develop really the harder development lift is down on the hill with the least amount of site possible, but also give start the flywheel spinning for the overall DNA of a new destination we hope to create within Zionsville. A little bit of eye candy. You guys have seen these, and we're fairly far advanced in designs. We're about 30 days away from a final set of construction documents. So these are fairly real as far as the facades and the architecture of the buildings. And again, so this isn't four-sided vinyl or hardy siding. So we're looking at, stone veneer, metal siding being Corten, steel, the patinas over time, just real depth of architecture. Delve has done a great job kind of marrying this with the overall Zionsville new aesthetic design standards so that we're both timeless and not trendy. I think, again, the worst thing we could do is something that kind of dates and gets tired in 4 or 5 years. But we also want to do something that's really creating, again, a new standard for this site. So zipping along to kind of why we're here tonight, and we can certainly talk more about the traffic piece as well. But again, the purpose of the phase one bonds, as we see it wholly, is really to attract and lower the barriers of entry for premier commercial development. So we've said this a couple of times, but these are kind of our 3 big points. And you guys have heard them before, I know. But essentially, this first phase is installing the entire infrastructure and the access across the entire corridor between Michigan Road and Sycamore for not just the multifamily, but for the entirety of the site. Increasing the density. While this is a great location for retail, it's still lacking in density. And to Steve's point in a lot of his retail discussions, the type of tenants that he wants to get that are higher end, to his point, they need to see that density first, and they want to see the movement and the traction, the traction that's happened And we want to do that in a way that minimizes as much site usage as possible to allow, frankly, for as much commercial AV on the site. So if we were to park 400 cars and surface park them, even if we were to get 400 apartments, it would take about the size of that parking lot in front of the kind of conceived grocery store there. And so the density of the grocery store, as well as sticking this down in kind of the harder part to develop of the site, we've got retaining walls galore in order to develop on this topography. Again, with the hope of lowering that barrier of entry, creating more developable retail sites that hopefully, it's a competitive market in the retail world, and we want this to be the spot that people pick to develop. And then finally, and you'll see a little bit of our costs, community architectural and site design elements. Again, we want to do this excellent in an excellent fashion. We want to set the design to both architecturally and from a landscaping perspective. This is kind of a quasi entrance, right? When you turn into Zionsville, and we don't hold that lightly. And so we really want to set that tone with what we're doing in the multifamily in phase one, that carries through to the design standards across the entire development. So kind of just, to the cost side, we'll talk about the bonds here in a minute, and Tom can hit on some of those amounts, as can Heather, at 12.28 million, I believe is the request, at 95%. Our cost for kind of these TIF needs, or the gap, is closer to 18 to 20 million. So when you start looking at these things that we're installing, we've got a little over $12 million in infrastructure between site work, utility mains, storm mains, gas, electric power, all of that, all of the roads, the landscaping along those roads, the retaining walls, the pavilion, et cetera. So that's kind of this red blob that you see, including the pond all the way down to Long Branch. Then the parking garage, which again, the objective there is to increase density, decrease site usage, at $6.5 million for a 405 stall garage. So just those two alone, not getting into architecture, not getting into facades, any of that stuff. And that's removing a lot of things that we would do anyway. So there's not elevators and things like that in there. That's purely, cost for those two pieces is somewhere between, I'm going to say 17 to 20 million. These are estimates off of design development budgets, but they're fairly real, and they certainly exceed the initial bond request.
Sean?
Yes, sir.
The last project we just talked about, same concept, developer-backed bond, showed a 4% interest rate. The paperwork I have shows an interest rate of nothing, like it's just an underscore. What is that interest rate that will be paid?
There was actually another spot where it shows 7.5.
So we have a maximum of 7.5%. Right, so the incentive to the developer will be the same amount regardless of if it's broken down as principal or interest. So it's a negotiable interest rate. There's no bank involved as they're buying their own bonds. So what this ordinance does is approves the maximum parameter that it could be, but it's still a negotiation point. It could certainly be less than that, down to zero.
Who's negotiating with whom on that?
Well, I suppose the redevelopment commission is leading those negotiations with the
So
developer.
that rate has yet to be set.
Right, it's not set in stone, as you'll see in the substantially final bond documents. It's blank in the bond purchase agreement and those documents. It's simply a maximum at this point.
So,
But to the extent that they had a 7.5% interest rate, it would then lower the principal that they would receive, the principal payments.
is the net dollars out the same at that point? So why would a developer want 7.5%, or why would they want 0%? Is that a tax thing?
Yeah, it's the way that they book their loan. I mean,
Got it.
If it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, it doesn't necessarily matter. And that's why it effectively operates as a tax abatement, because that increment generated is fixed. So if it's 95% of $1 million, it's 950,000. It doesn't matter if it's 80-20 principal interest.
If it's weighed more, if it's a higher rate and weighed towards more interest, what happens to the balance of the bond at the end of the term? Is it just evaporate? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I don't understand that.
Well, I mean, and again, I'm only thinking about it in my own mortgage, for example. If my mortgage is 3% or 7%, and sort of amortizing that over a 30-year, over time, it's shifting from interest to principal, and at the end, the balance is zero. It's a foreign concept for me to think about. If it's $12 million and the rate is 8% or 2%, and the payment is the same, Obviously, if it's 8%, you are paying down less principal over that same period of time. So therefore, in my mind, there is a principal balance left at the end of that 25-year period at an 8% rate that may not exist at a 2% rate. Is anyone from the town or the TIF on the hook in that scenario? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So as the TIF is generated on a semi-annual basis, the
Mhm.
developer will be paid back in accordance with a amortization schedule that the CRO team will put together.
Sure.
And the interest rate will be fixed at the time that we close. So then if the payment comes, if the TIF that's generated is insufficient to pay the developer in that particular payment, then that payment will remain, that principal amount will remain outstanding. And then if there's additional TIF in future years, it can come and make up the payment on the principal amount. There's no compounding interest if that interest isn't paid.
So it does matter then.
If you're not paying down the principal.
Yeah, so if there is excess TIF, instead of it going to the town or
When I
paying the
say it
loan
doesn't
down, it's-
matter, I mean, the amount of the incentives to the developer for the amount of the bond issuance will be the same. Well, we're issuing the same amount of bonds regardless of if we anticipate that it be more in principal or more in interest.
yeah, but if you're, I get it, let's call it $10 million just for round numbers. If you're putting in if you're doing a $10 million bond and there is a shortfall because the interest rate has been set too high, if it then does start generating excess cash, rather than paying that TIF down sooner, it just pays down the principal that was missed. Is that a correct statement? It doesn't feel like the town would be incentivized for the rate to be 7.5%. Like if I'm giving up money for the infrastructure, I also don't feel like I should be giving a 7.5% return on top of that. So I know that's not for today, but does that come back to us when that rate is set, or does that sit solely with the RDC?
So the only approval that we need from you is adoption of the bond ordinance, which approves the maximum parameters.
Can I modify those maximum parameters?
Yeah, there's certainly you have say over what your ordinance says, yes. After we have your approval, your official town council's approval, assuming you move forward with the bond ordinance, then there's no further approvals necessary. We're done with all of the public approvals. And then we're just negotiating the bond documents and walking towards closing.
So I don't know if we have to negotiate this tonight, but I thought the 4% rate on the previous project seemed reasonable.
Right.
I would love to see a similar rate on this project as well. And you're welcome to take that offline and come back.
Okay.
Again, I want to be reasonable. 7.5% seems that's a good deal but I just don't want to make sure that, because Zionsville is going to keep growing the AV, right? And this project I think is going to be great and it's going to also grow up in AV. I just want that excess AV to be paying this bond off quicker so that we're getting the revenue quicker rather than paying for shortfalls because an interest rate was set too high and too much of the AV was going towards interest payments and therefore the principal was not getting paid off and that's my request, I guess, at the roundabout.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, the interest rate definitely does matter.
Yes.
I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter.
One thing that I'll add, I believe that Crow estimated the par value of the bond using a 5% interest rate. And so our request is still 95% of the increment. So by manipulating the interest rate, that is going to manipulate the par value as well. And so
I don't know what that means.
The $12.28 million bond will increase.
It will increase if we lower the rate.
Yes,
Why?
because the function of capturing 95% of the increment. We can take it offline.
Well, no, we don't take it
But I
offline. I
thought-
think.
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I think they're
So-
looking at the same kind of money back to them.
Right.
So it's a manipulation. It's
There's-
going to manipulate the interest rate. That it's going to be offset by increases in the bond issuance. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so let's just use $1 million again. If you're paying a 4% interest rate and you're capturing TIF for 25 years, you're
just a function of the bond mechanism. You'll be paying more in principal over the 25-year period. So the par value of the bond is going to be higher.
I'll be paying more in principal at 4% than 5%.
Yes,
Correct.
because 95% is fixed. So it's 950,000 in this example for 25 years. So a greater portion of that increment
Is the bond not amortized over a 25-year period though?
It is.
Maybe I'm just struggling with this, but like, if
Maybe you could show them the schedules. I think it's easier to see it.
might be. It's a little dusty up here.
Essentially.
Is this the right way to do this?
Yeah, I think we need to figure out a way to maybe get this up there. Do anybody have this saved on a?
We can talk about it next meeting, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the reality is we do get another bite. Everybody says this, we get another bite at it at the next meeting. I mean, I think maybe to understand what we would want to see, similar to what we just shared with Matt, is to your point, what's the impact of the interest rates? What I still want to see what fees are being generated as a result of it too, like what money's in, and how does this look over the next 25 years?
Yeah, I'm okay I think I'm okay as TIF as a mechanism to create infrastructure to support a project for the town. I get squirrely when it starts becoming a financial tool outside and above and beyond that for private investment.
Yeah.
And I do want to understand, I think to President Plunkett's comment, I want to understand the levers that are moved. Why does a 5% rate to a 4% rate on a bond that has the same maturity date? Why does that impact? I believe you that it does, but I want to understand why it does. And I think
So your concern is that the principal on the bonds is not getting paid down fast enough?
I want to make sure the town is getting the best deal possible. And in my mind's eye, that would be the lowest rate possible that they're paying on interest for the captured AV. Therefore, if we're able to capture excess.
So if it were a 0% interest rate and it was the same amount of bond issuance, the same amount of TIF would be then generated and utilized to pay the developer back. It would just be all in the form of principal instead of broken down between principal and interest.
Yes.
It's the same dollars.
Right. But so in that scenario, right, if it's still the same amount and it's all principal, it's no interest, in my head, at the end of 25 years, there is a principal balance of zero, right? The bond has a value of zero.
At the end of the 25 years, we're done. If there's
Right.
something outstanding, they don't get paid back.
Okay, so that was the question I think that was never answered, which was
Okay,
if
so
there's
yes.
$3 million in principal left,
Regardless what's left at the end of 25 years.
it's
they're
wiped
done.
away.
Yes.
Okay, that's really what I just wanted to
Okay.
understand was.
Because it's a
It's
developer backed bond, and that's why.
That's right.
The same amount.
That's right.
And
So the pledge on the TIF is only good so long as the bonds are outstanding. Once we get to the maturity on the bonds, the developer is owed nothing.
So answer me this question, I guess, if the rate is 0% or 10% and there is excess revenue from the TIF district, in both scenarios, is it the same cash flow out and the timeline is being compressed?
Yes, although this deal's a little different than the last two because this one's only 95%, right? So
Sure.
remember that we've got the 5 that's going elsewhere.
If I was going elsewhere, but I just want to make sure that we are, because I think, again, that this will exceed the projections. I hope it will. Zionsville is a desirable place to live. And that the excess will be used to pay this off and not pay for shortfalls because it wasn't previously paid off because the interest was eating up what should have been a principal payment.
I see what you're saying. Yes. So in early years, during the 25-year period, if there's excess TIF in say year 7, and there was a shortfall in year 6, then that money would then go pay the year 6 payment before anything would pay year 7. But that catch up only goes for so long because once you get to the 25th year, the bonds are no longer outstanding. So if they didn't catch up during that time frame, then they don't get caught up all the way. They take the risk.
And in both scenarios, from an excess standpoint, it goes back.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. That's what I was trying to arrive at. I would, though, much like the last project, also be interested, and President Blunkett mentioned this, on, Skinnell certainly has a very good reputation. You guys know your numbers. I would love to see a similar kind of breakdown of, all right, these are the expected residents we have in phase one. This is their expected average income that will generate X amount for our public safety lit, which goes towards police and fire. Based on that demographic, they will eat at, they'll spend so much eating out, hopefully in Zionsville restaurants, and that will generate food and beverage. Any fees you're creating out of this, anything else you can think of that this project is going to generate, I think would be helpful to, again, understanding that we're getting 5%, but majority of it is captured for 25 years, to just, again, build that financial model out for me, and I think for others.
And I believe that after I processed it for a minute, I think I understand what you were saying with if we reduce the interest rate, it would effectively increase the principal amount, because you're getting 95% of whatever, no matter if that 95% is principal and interest, or if it's just principal. So you're getting, the way the ordinance is written, it's 95% no matter what.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, that makes more. I'm
So
processing.
what were you referencing then, that if we lower the interest rate, it would affect the par?
Just the value of the bond.
Okay,
He was saying that if you lower the interest rate, we need to increase the maximum bond parameter to be able to finance the same project.
Yeah, in order to capture the full 95%.
okay, gotcha.
So you mentioned, Heather, earlier, I think you mentioned that the negotiation takes place between the RDC. So if this moves forward today, do you guys then go back to the RDC? Or-
Not an official, there's no official meetings. I mean, this is all just now a negotiation between between me and their lawyers. And so I'm very happy to hear any of your thoughts and
Okay.
work with you on that.
And then this will be back on the 15th.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from counselors?
No, but just a statement, because I want to make clear to anybody that may be listening that I view this as substantially different than the last proposal, because that last proposal had the main road going down between it. It could have been split as
Could have
two
been,
separate projects. This one is kind of it is a single project that all works together to make it work. So I just view this one entirely differently than I did that last project, and I feel that's important to note, because I think that the prior project could have been separated out to the commercial and TIF that, and not the residential piece. I don't think you could do that with this particular project.
I think you're right. I think the issue with the last project is that it was discussed and negotiated so long ago, right? And so that's that project agreement was entered into.
Just to touch on that too, that project, the drainage is connected. It's developed all the way around that project. I think that's why it plays into that a little bit differently than this one. This one is all encompassing, but that one's been developed around. We're dependent on utilities from Whitestown, and that drainage for both of those properties is designed to be together. Is the bond issuance of 25 years, is that a number that can change?
Yes.
20, 30?
No, 25-year maximum.
Okay.
And again, it's a maximum parameter in the ordinance, but 25 years is typical. And if you were to lower the amortization period, then that would increase the principal and interest amounts. It would compress that. Right?
And we get our tax, the TIF would end quicker.
I guess my point is that then they would be looking to increase the par amount of the bonds probably. I mean, it's spread over 25 years so that it's generated
So it can be
based on the
affordable.
schedule that the financial, right, that the municipal advisor put together that shows when the money's rolling in, how long they think it would take to pay off a bond of that amount. So you change one lever and it changes everything.
Any other questions for counselors?
Nope.
I would entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 2022-15 on first reading.
Second. First by Counselor Traylor, second by Counselor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last item on the agenda for new business is consideration of the ordinance authorizing bonds for the Carpenter Nature Preserve. This is the first reading, ordinance 2022-16. Jared?
Thank you very much. Jared Logston, Superintendent of Parks and Recreation here in Zionsville. With me tonight are Tim and Becca of Crow Municipal Advisors, as well as Heather of Ice Miller. They have been the bond counsel on this process up to date. The Zionsville Parks Department has been growing exponentially over the past decade, to the point now that we are the stewards of over 500 acres just within the Eagle Township. Now, the reason we're able to successfully maintain this acreage is because the majority of it is passive. And I truly believe it is that connection to all that greenery and all that infrastructure and that connection to nature that has truly made Zionsville a town within a park, to the point that the logo behind you embraces that fully for our town. All of those parks made possible, the trails, the developments, the infrastructure, were made possible with our tax dollars in our annual budget, as well as leveraging every grant opportunity we can possibly have. On occasion, there are projects that merit even more involvement from the community, and we request responsibly the bond process to move forward with those. First example of this was in 2007, when the Parks Department pursued bond for the development of Mulberry Fields. 20 years later, we have paid that off before its expiration in 2027. And the community has enjoyed that park ever since 2008, hosting birthdays, celebrations, and gatherings at its shelters, welcoming our youth sports, our rugby teams, football, and Little League to the reserved fields, as well as the community gathering at the splash pad for summertime cooling off. Most recently, in 2019, the Parks Department also pursued 2 more bonds. That was for the Overly Warman Park and the rail trail. So both of those projects are nearing completion, and the community is beginning to enjoy those benefits now, and those will just continue throughout the rest of the year as we finalize Overly Warman Park and fully realize 5 miles of rail trail in the next year. Speaking of the rail trail, this was, one of the first projects that kind of defined what our park system is today. Our rail trail serves as the spine of our park system, with the majority of our connections leading to other parks from that trail. And I believe the Carpenter Nature Preserve has the potential to be the heart of our park system as we continue to grow. The Carpenter Nature Preserve is 215 acres in rural Union Township, formerly a golf course that was operating up until 2017. As it closed its doors, this land was already once considered for development, which ultimately it was declined as not the right time due to the lack of utilities and other amenities up in that region. In 2020, Jim and Nancy Carpenter entered the scene, visiting the property and realizing the potential it had as the newest park and conservation project, not only in Boone County, but in Zionsville. Finding opportunities this large in central Indiana are exponentially hard to do. So much so that this would not only serve as our largest park in the county, but this is approximately half our current acreage today in one location. So the Carpenters, realizing what this land could become, decided to serve as the interim stewards of that land and purchase it from the owner. Not only that, the Carpenters also offered to donate this to the town for a discounted bargain sale rate of 1.5 off of its appraised value. 1.5 million. So that's quite the generous gift from two citizens just living in our town that believe in the park system here. Sorry about that. Let me back up. So I wanted to express the timeline of how this project has progressed over the last 2 years. March 10th, 2021, the Zionsville Parks Board entered into a letter of intent with the Carpenters to explore this shared vision of transforming the former Wolf Run Golf Course into a public park. In September 7th, the Parks Department requested an additional appropriation from the Parks Cash Reserve Funds to fund the master planning of the Carpenter Nature Preserve. We invited all of town council out there, and after a few ticks, we hope the majority of you saw the potential of that site. After we reconvened in September, the town council voted unanimously 7 in favor, 0 opposed to fund the master planning of the site. After that date, we got to work. Runsdale, Ernstberger and Associates, as well as Ecologic, surveyed the 215 acres and conducted a elaborate public master planning process to re-envision the former Wolf Run Golf Course. They invited input from the town, department, carpenters, stakeholders, and the public as we move forward with that process. Before you on this slide is the preferred concept that was shaken out of that master planning process. It was essential that as we look to develop this park, it was not going to become the next Mulberry Fields or a concert venue. This was to remain the majority of it natural. So as you see, the majority of our development is to the outer areas that are already disturbed.
Are we supposed to? I don't think the
That's what
slides are connected.
Okay. Thank you for that. 1 second. All right, that's much better, right? Sorry about that technical difficulty. So the preferred concept from the master planning embraced the large majority of the site remaining natural. The majority of the infrastructure remains on the developed portions of the site, and a meandering system of rustic trails activate the rest of the site, allowing people to experience the different biomes and habitats that will be throughout the future park. Not only is it an opportunity to conserve 250 acres of a diverse amount of ecological habitats, it would also offer new amenities and a couple of firsts for our park system. We explored what a nature center would look like on that site. For the past 20 years, nature education has been the backbone of our programming within Zionsville Parks and Recreation. And we have been tenants on several properties as we continue that mission. It would be nice to finally explore what a permanent nature center would become and develop that to become a regional amenity to not only attract the youth and the residents of Zionsville, but also of central Indiana. The master planning process also explored public art and nature playgrounds, again, to provide opportunities for those that might not be connected to nature to have some exposure and experience to that. We also explored the opportunity for a small events gathering space. This space would be future development and serve as a revenue generating opportunity for the town to continue operations on the site and minimize our dependency on the general fund and tax base moving forward. And again, these are long-term plans that were developed within that master planning process. Within that master planning process, we invited the public to weigh on how we could make this dream become a reality. We asked them first how they would like us to acquire the property and to select all the mechanisms that they would support. So as you can see, it is quite the split pie chart. Most certainly the existing budget, new taxes, and municipal bonds are components of that, as well as public and private partnerships. Once acquired, we also asked the next question of how would the town develop the park after acquisition? Again, exploring the different opportunities we might have to generate revenue on this site and support its operations. Again, our citizens mentioning that municipal bonds, the existing fund, new fees, as well as new taxes could support that, and they would be in favor. We took this one step further after having a discussion with you all in May. and specifically asked, as we realize this park in the coming years, would the community support a bond for its acquisition? And the opportunities were yes, no, maybe with the right conditions, and other. So approximately 64%, that's 657 of the 1,016 individuals that responded, were completely in the affirmative for a bond to float this acquisition of this parcel. Further, maybe with the right conditions was another 227. So if those conditions were met, which weren't necessarily specified in the survey, that would be approximately 87% of those polled. Now, some of those conditions that we did read were under that the citizen would understand the financial situation of our town, our debt capacity, and what this would mean for the tax base. Continuing that timeline, once that master plan was complete, we reported those findings to the park board on May 11th, and then to town council on May 16th. It was that time that we discussed the overall budget for making this master plan a reality, which sat around $23 million. So with that number in front of you, we discussed this being a legacy project. Once time is on our side and this land is a part of our park system, it can take as many years as it does to realize a nature center or the full infrastructure of this park. Time will be on our side. So with the information from the bond questions as well as the master plan, we began to explore the bonding process with Ice Miller and Crow. At the July 13th Park Board meeting, the Park Board passed a declaratory resolution to explore bonding of the Carpenter Nature Preserve acquisition in the amount of $5.3 million, not to exceed an interest rate of 5%. So now with kind of where we are today, I wanted to remind you all that this truly is a once in a generation opportunity. You know, 54% of our park system is through donations. That means the other remaining percentage is actually through acquisition and other trading deals. So this is an opportunity of not only a donation, but also to proactively acquire this land from future development and for Union Township to have its first park in our park system. But I wanted to touch on all the reasons why this is not only a great park system for Zionsville, a great park project, but also touches on so many capstone projects that this department has been working on for the past 2 decades. Obviously, first and foremost, 215 acres in rural Zionsville is an excellent opportunity for conservation on a grand scale. Habitat fragmentation is one of the leading causes and issues for wildlife conflicts as we humans continue to grow in our population and want to live somewhere. 215 acres would certainly host a large population of flora and fauna, especially as those are pushed out through future development as our community continues to grow. Furthermore, as you look at these colorful maps, you'll notice that it's quite the mosaic of different shades and tones. Well, each of those is actually a different biome and supported ecosystem. So not only are we talking about only hardwoods or only prairie, we're talking about multiple environments that could support and sustain sensitive species that are found in central Indiana. So kind of a unique find for Boone County, certainly. Also want to mention that this would help us on our mission to create a complete park system. So as you'll notice on this map, all of the green indicated areas are our current park system, which are all housed within Eagle Township. It is part of our mission to ensure that we create an equitable park system for all of Zionsville, and that includes Perry and Union Townships as well. So this would be the first flag planting of our park system in their neck of the woods in Union Township and provide a destination for us to continue to grow that infrastructure up towards. From the 2013 master planning study, we found that 75% of those that were polled supported the acquisition of additional green space. Further, in 2018, we found similar findings with approximately 60% completely in favor and another 24% somewhat in favor. So there's a hunger and a thirst for more green infrastructure and conservation in Zionsville. We'll have those updated numbers as we finalize our 2022 master plan at the end of this year. These are some early numbers from our current master plan that I just mentioned. As we begin to develop this quality of life that some of our residents are experiencing and enjoying, and part of the reason they moved to our community, we wanted to ask how important it was for parks and trails to be activated and within walking distance of their homes. And as you can see, the large majority said that was extremely important to them. That is this disparity of our urban and rural divide at this time, knowing that our urban community is going to continue to grow into those rural areas. We have to look forward and have this green infrastructure in place to serve those residents just as equitably as we are our urban core today. Also asked in our current master planning process, would you like Zionsville to invest more money into parks and recreation? Overwhelmingly, again, that is sponsored with a yes. And also asked how they would like our department to pay for new amenities and programs. As you can see, again, they want us to explore every and all options for making that dream a reality. Every study, every survey, every poll we send out to the community, the information we get back is astoundingly, it's always yes, more. We want to see more. Being a smaller population, we're competing with our neighbors of 2-3 times our population. And our residents expect those services here in Zionsville. And our small but mighty staff continue to provide as much as we can each year. And that number of programs, amenities, parks is growing to keep up with that demand. Again, why is this project important and a capstone to our decades of initiatives? Well, this would be the final terminus of the Eagle Creek Greenway. So in 2016, Zionsville was assessed for its walkability and its pathway system. Among that, if you look at the dotted line that follows the riverbed, that is the Eagle Creek Greenway, which has been proposed to have a trail traveling throughout Zionsville. And it also, decades ago, our park board began conversations with Indy Parks to talk about having that trail travel down to their Eagle Creek Park. So again, these large, long-range projects take decades to see implemented. That's why as you drive around Zionsville today, you'll see sidewalks that just end. Well, not only are we building Zionsville sidewalks and pathways today for our residents, but it's for future connections as we continue to improve and develop in our community. The same can be said for our parks. Some of the information and the feedback we received is that this park is, far away from everything else that's kind of developed now. And that's absolutely true. But again, if we try to grab this amount of land when everything around it is developed, it's not going to happen. At that point, the utilities, the infrastructure is going to be there, and this will be a much higher ticket item. That'll be much more of an appetite for our developers to transform as originally intended after 2017. Further, this supports the past decade of DNR layer work. So for the past 9 years, the Parks Department has been working with the DNR Lake and River Enhancement Program to fortify the banks and shoreline of Starkey. And this year, we're currently updating that study to also look at Overly Warman's banks. And ultimately, what this project does is fortify our stream and our creek beds so that we can reduce the amount of erosion and sediment that's going into our tributaries and ultimately our drinking water here in Zionsville. So having the capstone of this Eagle Creek as it enters into Zionsville will offer us an additional 2/3 of a mile of river frontage that can be fortified and reduce that sediment going downhill. When you control erosion, you're also assisting with flooding. So when properly allowing the creek to flow as it should and not creating new channels, you certainly can't harness water, but you're helping it do exactly what it wants to do, and we can develop alongside that better. The Carpenter Nature Preserve would also, as we mentioned in the master planning process, provide a suitable site for a nature center. So the Zion Nature Center was a grassroots effort that began 20 years ago to this year, actually, this September, of residents that wanted to see nature education in their town. They formed together and formed a board and actually created the first Zion Nature Sanctuary within a school facility at Eagle Elementary. From there, we kind of outgrew that, and we now are in partnership with the library, the Hussey Mayfield Library, where our current nature center sits and entertains over 1,000 residents per month. The Carpenter Nature Reserve someday would provide that permanent nature center, which could not only welcome today's population, but also residents and non-residents in the area. Currently, our summer camp program welcomes just over 250 students every single summer. 24% of those are approximately non-residents. The largest constraint for our staff from providing more summer camp opportunities is the lack of a dedicated facility. We've explored potentially utilizing rooms at Town Hall, but we don't think that 30 to 60 screaming children will be quite appropriate for the business that goes on here during the day. The Nature Center would allow us to not only program a larger summer camp program, not only satisfying the demands of Zionsville, but also Carmel and neighboring communities that also want to explore and be a part of nature education in their region. And as I mentioned, the potential for the site is also to be a regional draw for our community. This is exactly the type of project that the Regional Development Authority has been looking for. Currently with the READY grant, this type of project would be a great applicant for that as well. And just creating that placemaking that is going to make Zionsville and specifically Indianapolis outcompete Denver, Colorado, or Austin, Texas. We are actually on a national stage trying to retain and attract our residents into our communities. As I mentioned, with a dedicated nature center and potential White Oaks Commons private-public partnership, we would stimulate the local economy. Conner Prairie sees over 400,000 participants every single year. Eagle Creek sees over 1.2 million. Even obtaining a fraction of that outside population coming into Zionsville, filling their gas tanks, or having a meal within the village will stimulate our local economy, add to our food and beverage taxes, and also showcase some of what makes Zionsville, Zionsville. And with those facilities on site, we could also further recover the cost of the program associated with the site. So not only funding the positions within the building, but also paying for a percentage of the operating costs of that facility. So as I mentioned throughout this presentation, this is a legacy project. Those numbers are absolutely large, but time is on our side for this project once we secure the land. The Carpenters graciously are offering $1.5 million off the appraised price of this property. But again, they have been paying taxes on this for the past 2 years, and this generous opportunity won't always be on the table. Just to understand the importance of why we're pursuing a bond rather than trying to do this in-house completely, I just wanted to be completely transparent about where the park system is today. So when the park system joined the general fund, we brought with us $2.7 million in earmarked parks capital reserves. So that is the fund that we've utilized for the recent Zionsville Golf Course cart path improvements, as well as the master planning for this project, as well as our 5-year master plan. And again, once those earmarked funds are gone, they're gone. The same can be true with our Parks Non-Reverting Capital Reserve. So every year within the general fund, the Parks Department receives $314,000 for improvements in our park system. As we're good stewards with those dollars and don't spend them all, they revert to this non-reverting capital reserve for future use. So you can see over the past decade, approximately where that sits from our year-to-year operations. And finally, we have a park impact fee. So every new residential development pays a part of the park impact fee per housing unit. We passed an updated study this year earlier, if you recall. So currently that fund sits at $2.4 million. And I also wanted to provide a brief history of our municipal bond usage. So as I mentioned, in 2007, the Mulberry Fields bond was passed for $5 million within Eagle Township. And that was approximately 5.61 cents per $100 assessed value. As I mentioned, that bond was actually paid off early last year. So those Eagle Township residents saw that 5 cents come off their property taxes. And most recently in 2019, we did have the Rail Trail and Overly Warman Parks bonds pass at $8.6 million. And those are currently on the tax fund. So the 2022 Carpenter Nature Preserve bond request is for $5.3 million. That is approximately $5 million towards acquisition, and any remaining funds will be utilized for construction, design, and development. The goal would be to get this project as shelf-ready as possible. And then as grant opportunities, as fundraising becomes available, that's when we develop the park. Again, not becoming a toll on our larger park system, but working alongside other active capital projects. The other remaining 300,000 of that is approximately a prepaid payment on the capital interest for the bond. So for the 2022 Carpenter Nature Preserve bond request, it is approximately 1.06 cents per $100 assessed value on our property taxes. So an example I've been using, approximately a $300,000 assessed value home would pay $31.80 annually, or approximately 8.7 cents a day. And again, remember, in our Eagle Township, this year they saw that 5 cents come off. So even with this, the Carpenter Nature Preserve bond passing, that would still be 4 cents lower than what they had in 2021. And again, that's all I had prepared for this evening. Happy to have a discussion. I would like to request, if possible, to continue this to the August 15th meeting on our first reading. I want to provide you with all the information possible for this important decision that is before you. So to provide those bond documents for your review, but also to give you information as the Parks Department holds their public hearing for this process at the August 10th meeting next week. And as I mentioned, we do have representatives from Crow as well as Ice Miller here to answer any financial questions you may have.
What is the appraised price of the land today?
The last appraisal we received was 5.6 million.
And when was that done?
That was done in November of 2020.
I think it was on one of your slides earlier, but for everything that you're wanting to do with this long-term as a legacy project, what is the total cost of the project?
I believe it is right around 23 million, and that is a master planning level. So I believe, as Councilor Garrett mentioned at the May meeting, the longer this goes, those costs will go up just because of the price of business and inflation over years to come. So, but again, once that land is acquired, it's no longer a race, it's a marathon. As those funding opportunities become available, as those grants, as those fundraising and private partnerships realize, that's as we develop the park. Even with the master planning process, we've received countless emails from school teachers and citizens wondering how they can volunteer and begin to improve the site through invasive removal or just site restoration. So truly there's already a spirit of wanting this project to become realized in Zionsville. And I believe as we slowly develop this park and begin to invite them back in, that's only going to build.
So is there not contemplated an anticipation that, say, for the nature center of 7 to 10 million, that we would be bonding that out?
That is not the plan. No, my hope is that we only come before the council one time, and that would be for this bond of the acquisition. We do have the Zionsville Parks Foundation, which just came online last year. And one of their first capital campaigns could be the funding of Carpenter Nature Preserve. Now, something to mention on that is that Nancy Carpenter is both the president of that board as well as the owner of this land. So currently at this time, we're unable to fundraise for the preserve due to that conflict. Now, once the land is rightfully owned by the town, that conflict would resolve and the full abilities of the Parks Foundation could be realized for this project.
I'm real skeptical the Zionsville Parks Foundation is going to pay even a portion of this. I mean, I got to be honest, you're asking for real money. I'm going to give you real feedback. I always thought the Parks Foundation was going to pay for the land. That was sort of what I was told. But how much has the Parks Foundation raised to date?
To date overall? That would be a question for one of their board members.
Got it. I have concerns about our Parks Department's ability to execute on this project. The last three things I voted for, Winterfest, I was shocked at how much money that lost. The Overly Ormond Park, I went after the grand opening and couldn't find the park because it was all still under construction. And the trails for the golf course were 3 months delayed. So coming back and asking for $5.3 million when the last 3 times I voted yes, and I don't feel those have gone smoothly, feels like the wrong time. This is my big concern though. And it's a theme, right? Is like, I don't know where the town is financially. We see these things in a vacuum, right? I see the tax rate that's potential for this, but we're also in a capped tax system. So you giveth and you taketh. And I am concerned from taking to give here without knowing what I'm taking from. I think the land is beautiful. I think the Carpenters are a great partner. I think this could be something that could be great. But until those financials are fixed, I in good conscience can't write a check for anything. This is not an indictment of this project. This is anyone coming to me asking for $5.3 million. I am, so that the administration sent out posts on Instagram and email and Facebook asking to contact your counselors for support for this project. And I got, I think, 4 emails for this. One of the interesting comments on Instagram that I read was someone said, I like this idea of parkland, but I'd prefer a community center. And the administration response is, we are 100% behind a community center. So I'm surprised that we're going to spend a lot of bonding capacity on this project when the administration is saying they want a community center. I'd ask the mayor, which is not here. What bothered me about that statement too was that it said, unfortunately, the town council denied the request. Well, why did we deny the request? Because the financials were a mess, and that was last year. So it irks me a little bit that we are lobbed over these giant projects. And I think in good conscience deny them because we don't know what the financials are, and then are made to look like we're the bad guys here. It's fine, it's part of the job. But, and this is not for you, Jared, but I want the financials fixed. And if this is an incentive for the administration to fix it quickly so they can come back to me and say, we're fixed, I can definitively say that we can afford this with everything else we want to do. I'm open to the idea, but I need to see solid, stable financials. And this council, you on many times, has said, we will provide resources if you need it to appropriate it to help fix the financials. And we've never been asked to provide those resources. So why are we being asked to write huge checks for bonds when no one is taking us up on the basic thing of fixing financials so vendors get paid and we can see where the funds are and we have a general idea of how this impacts the macro scale of this budget? This is like buying a home, a real nice home, and not even checking your bank statement. So I want that fixed. If this is an incentive to fix it. I want it stable. And then we can have that conversation of, all right, we're also doing a 5-year plan, the Parks 5-year plan. I would love to see how this fits in the 5-year plan. If the financials are fixed and this is top of mind of the 5-year plan, then I think we can have that conversation. And then I think I need to be convinced that we can implement this because we're adding 50% more acreage. And I'm also concerned this will suck up all of the attention of the Parks Department to the detriment of what is otherwise a fantastic park system that we have today. So I'm not supportive of the bond for reasons that are outside of your control, Jared. I know that's disappointing, I'm sure, for you to hear, but I can't in good conscience write a check today until I know what that is. That is just my stance. So I don't see a need to continue it unless the financials are going to be fixed in 2 weeks, which they're not, because I want to see them stable. Other councilors can certainly make their piece, but that is where I'm at today.
Well, I mean, I'm frustrated that we have this presentation and it's not in our packet. Clearly, this work has been done. I mean, clearly this presentation was prepared and this was something you wanted at the July meeting and missed the deadline to get it submitted. And then this meeting missed the deadline to get it submitted, but now we have it. I mean, that's what I'm irritated about here, because you have everything you need to go for the request. It just wasn't in the packet. You mentioned the bond for Mulberry Field in 2007. I mean, we've got lights on Mulberry Field that you and I have had conversations about. We can't even turn them on. We got a dog park that was paid for by taxpayers. People in my district are complaining about having to get on a wait list to get in and have to pay a fee for a property they've already paid for. Your presentation itself stated 70% of the people in town want to be able to walk to the park and trail facilities. I've got constituents that just want to walk to town. And for 2 years, I've been told by the administration that that's a priority. I also have a hard time with the floating number of, we talked about a year ago that this was a $4 million property or $4 million request from the town council when we get there. And now we understand it's a $5.3 million bond, of which 4.5 of it is now for the acquisition cost because the price has gone up. And we all know what's happened to property values since 2020. My concern is we don't have an agreed upon appraisal value that we can come back to and say, yes, it's 4.5. I mean, my question would be, if it's 7 or 8 and you ask for 5.3, I mean, if it's 8, we're paying 6.5 and we pass the bond for 5.3. What happens? And the answer is we just pay interest on a bond. I mean, I think I've got a lot of, this is a big lift for me, and to get behind this, and to Josh's point, I don't know that I have historically on this council stated publicly that if there's something I'm not supportive of, I'm not in support of continuing it or pushing it down the road. If I'm not supportive of it, then I would like to take a vote on it. But obviously, councilors can weigh in however they want to.
Yeah, so this one, I totally get the financial, right? Yeah, it's a mess. What I don't want to do is I think this is a very, well, it's a unique opportunity. I would like to see us buy the property, get it under our ownership, and then we've got all the time in the world. What I don't want to see happen is this property no longer become available, and we end up, 20 years from now, we look back like we look at Anson today, or like we look at the airport today and say, man, somebody really missed the ball. And people won't remember how screwed up the administration has the finances today. They won't remember that. I don't want, I just don't want to miss the opportunity to at least secure the land. Everything else we have time for. Even the property itself today, if we didn't do anything else to it, could be usable for, by residents, as it sits. But I totally get nobody's more frustrated about the finances of this town than I am, but I don't want to miss the opportunity that is presenting itself.
We could do this bond and still not get the property.
Easily. I think easily.
Look at Hankey's development up at Promontory. The thing's selling like hotcakes at a per acre price that would blow this out of the water. I mean, this thing could appraise for $10 million. We then issued a bond for something that we then still can't afford.
Yeah, I do. I mean, have you had discussions with the carpenters about what if the property comes in? I mean, if they're going to take $1.5 million off the appraised value, is there any cap on that? Because originally, I am with Jason. I think originally we all thought it was going to be $1 million off of the acquisition price. So the appraised value, does raise a significant concern. But has there been a conversation about if it appraises extremely high, what do we do?
Yeah, that would fall back on us if it has changed so drastically in the last year that we can't afford that. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, the max.
I mean, it's been almost 2 years. I mean, a lot has happened in property values in 18 months.
Yep. And as I mentioned, the maximum that they're willing to offer as a gift, again, there would be a gift to the town, would be that 1.5 million.
Yeah.
So beyond that, we would explore granting or look into our cash reserves if there was a difference beyond the bond.
I think we might want to get that appraisal because that would.
I mean,
that
again,
significantly affects.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all the reasons I stated here are the reasons why I'm against it. Primarily is the moving target on the cash.
Yeah.
And incomplete.
I mean, I think, I'm not sure on, that's such a unique property. I'm not sure how long it would take to get an appraisal back on that. Probably, I would think a month. But I think that would be something worthwhile, at least to me. I know there's some people that just aren't ready to move forward at all with it, and I get that. But for me, I think it would be good if we had a solid number, because if we had the appraised value, we'd know what we were really dealing with. And I am very supportive of this. I like the long-term vision of it. But yeah, if we, it may be a deal killer if it appraises way higher than what we're expecting.
Certainly. And I'm with Counselor Trailer on this. I would love to see us acquire this. I think it's a very unique opportunity. It's, I do have some reservations based, and I have agreements with some of the things that President Plunk and Counselor Garrett have stated. We keep looking at our finances, and we have, we're a town, we're limited on what kind of revenue we generate and is available for spending. And last year's budget was not really a balanced budget. We dipped into our reserves to pay for certain things. And so, as these things come about, we have to figure out how are we going to effectively pay for it if it exceeds our understanding of what the revenues generated and what the bond costs are. So I'm with you. I would support this moving forward, Counselor Trailer. But if it comes back as this is the appraised value is so high that we're now having to decide to dip into our reserves to pay the shortfall, then we've got real financial situation that we're having to look at. So I don't think I can approve it without understanding what we're paying for.
Well, to be clear, there's not an ordinance here to approve tonight.
Oh, right.
Right. My understanding was that there was going to be an appraisal after the purchase so that the carpenters could actually know what they donated, not another appraisal so we knew what to pay. Am I missing something on that? Because that's a conversation you and I had.
Yeah, certainly they wanted an updated appraisal as we went through this process and more time went on to not exceed that 1.5 million gift that they're considering. So just the fact that more time has passed and they would like an updated appraisal for that difference.
So who's on the hook for that? Would that be the Parks Department or would that be the carpenters?
Certainly, I believe that would be the Parks Department as part of our due diligence.
When did they say they wanted that appraisal? Like, when did they request that?
Throughout the master planning process.
So we've had plenty of time to do this.
So why hasn't it been done then?
The funding was not in place for the acquisition. So again, that timetable would continue to move until that.
For the appraisal?
Yeah. Well, for what the value of the land would be at the time of purchase.
So an appraisal?
Yes.
So essentially, if we do it now, we don't really still know because it could be another year before we close this deal.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand
It could
what's so
change again.
difficult about getting a mutually agreed upon
Purchase
appraisal
agreement.
value.
Your purchase agreement in place.
Yeah.
You're buying for this amount of price, and we're going to bond to that.
So certainly if we move forward with the appraisal and have that number, a solid number before all agreed parties, that will provide more confidence moving forward.
So my recommendation would be not to continue this, but just rather let this fall off because we don't have anything to vote on anyway here. Let this fall off, get the appraisal, and then, that is in my mind on a piece of property like that, an appraisal would be, it'd be several $1,000s, but compared to the overall of, investment that we may make in this, I think that's reasonable to do an appraisal and then come back when we have, because I think we can get that appraisal. You can come back and say, okay, here's the price now. And I really thought it was going to be of the their million, because I thought it was gonna be $1 million off of their acquisition cost. I didn't realize it was gonna be off of the appraised value, but. Okay.
When's the 5-year plan available?
So that is currently underway. We're still gathering input. In September, there will be recommendations that we're seeing as trends. The community will vote on those, and ultimately that'll get wrapped in to the document that we provide in December for your approval and adoption.
And for the information of the council, I have been on that committee working on the 5-year plan. I did make it pretty clear that I personally don't see how you put both this project and a community center, indoor aquatic center on the same 5-year plan. I think you kind of have to, like you said, pick one way or the other, and this would be my pick.
And that's my concern, is if we pick now and then it comes back overwhelmingly in the 5-year plan that it is something else, we've effectively made our bed. So why even do the 5-year plan?
Yeah. I'd like to see the appraisal.
So Adam, let me ask you, he has requested to continue this. Since there's not an actual ordinance, do we have to vote to continue that, or do we just, to Councilor Traylor's point, take no action and just leave this alone and decide that if we decide to table or put this on the agenda at a later date, we put it on the agenda at a later date?
Well, if you continue it, you're gonna have to keep continuing it until you get the information that you've requested. So if you are looking for more information to be provided, I would let it fall off. Once you have received that information, then you can put it back on the agenda. Otherwise, you're just gonna have to keep continuing it every meeting.
Just fall off. We don't have to vote it up or down. We can just
Really
take
don't have
no
anything to
action.
vote on. There's no ordinance or
Right.
anything you presented.
Right.
Even though there's an ordinance listed in the agenda.
But there was
Right.
no ordinance.
No, I understand, but
Yeah,
I'm
we
just saying,
weren't
like, there's a
provided
reference to ordinance in the agenda that's published to the public.
I mean, the other thing too, I guess, is we can always bring, even if it were, I guess you can't vote down something that's not presented, but even if it were hypothetically voted down, we could bring it back with the majority approval of the council, correct?
Right.
At any time. We could initiate that on the agenda.
It's not like a development agreement where you've got a 1-year cooling off
I
period.
don't think we have enough to vote on anything.
We don't have any.
Yeah.
Right.
The ordinance.
Procedurally, it's cleaner just to wait until you have the information and then put it on the agenda. I mean, you guys are ultimately in control of what's on the agenda.
Yeah, so we just don't do anything here.
There is no time horizon of no action. You know, when stuff comes from the planning commission, if we don't vote on it, it automatically then gets, if there's anything coming from the Parks Board related to this, there's nothing that's automatically then done if we don't act on a certain period of time.
No, you have to authorize a bond.
Got it.
Yeah, all they did was pass a resolution.
Yeah, okay. I figured that, but I just want to make sure that.
I wish you had led with the continuance, for the record. I don't like that we had all this information. Again, my frustration about that is you missed the deadline twice and clearly had the information available to us. That's a tough pill for me to swallow. But
Certainly. Well, in closing, we will pursue that information and get that back before you shortly. Also, I'd like to talk about the comments that were also made about our park system. So with a project like this, it would be in balance with the larger park system. So when we began the bonding process, we explored what was our capacity for bonding. So Josh, that was one of the questions you had in May, and we discovered that is approximately 13 million today. So of this 5.3, that would be around 40% leaving 60% for future opportunities, future infrastructure needs, et cetera. So certainly, as we explore this once in a generation opportunity for conservation and a public park in our community, we balanced it with the larger park system. Now, Josh, to your comments about Winterfest and the other projects you approved, Winterfest welcomed over 5,000 attendees, which by far is our most celebrated activity we've put on to date. So certainly there were some upfront costs that we're looking to improve that cost recovery as we move forward, just like we are with all of our programs, summer camp down to our craft program. So that is something we are pursuing as we develop 2022's Winterfest.
That was a different sales pitch that was given to me when I approved the money.
Certainly.
So this is where the credibility comes into play, is that you told me then this would be a self-sustaining event. much like there were things in this presentation about all the revenue this is going to generate. That didn't happen. I'm not discounting the impact it had on the community. I don't think government's job is to make money, but when the sales pitch is made one way and it doesn't work out, and then I'm told, no, that wasn't what it was. It was actually the community engagement. It should have been the community engagement all along. My concern is, as I've stated, those three projects I don't think have gone swimmingly. You're now asking to add something before those have really been. I have no doubt that well, the golf course is already great, right? But I was disappointed that we lost 2 to 3 months of revenue. I have no doubt that the Overly Warm Park will be great. But there were a lot of hiccups along the way. You're asking for another big leap of faith before those hiccups have been concerned. And those hiccups are combined with a much bigger hiccup, which is our financial system that you can't control. Right. So you are somewhat riding the negative coattails of something you can't control. If I had a full picture of this town's financials and I could see how this bond and future bonding capacity would impact the ability of ensuring that we're able to fund police, fund fire, fund roads, fund those basic services that drive that AV, this would be a lot less of an issue for it. I still have an issue. I still have a concern with the growth component of this relative to the Parks Department's capacity to take it, but it would be a lot less of a problem. You are just, unfortunately, a victim of, and we all are, of these last 18 months of just not knowing the financials. I can't write a $5.3 million check not knowing the financials. If I know the financials in 6 months, I might be more willing to write that check. That is where I'm at. And it's not a Parks Department. If Lance comes to me with a $5.3 million check, I'd have the same concerns, right? Certainly. It is a, in 10 years, this is probably a nothing, but we can't declare bankruptcy, right? I mean, if we have overextended ourselves with obligations for bonds, we are forced to make sure we live within our means. And if bond obligations are number one, we would have to cut other non-discretionary spending, which could be anything, right? And I just want to make sure we aren't painting ourselves into a corner. That is my only concern.
Thank you. I think that, I mean, echoing again, what we've gone through in the last budget process of kind of shifting monies around to make it look like we have a balanced budget when we actually don't. I think that's my fear going forward is where are we, much to your point, and we keep harping on this, where are we financially? How much have we dipped into reserves? How much have we spent certain funds down to zero? I don't know. I have no idea.
That's why we approved that sustainability plan that we never got, right? Like that was the whole idea about it, right? To make sure that this shifting, this shell game is sustainable for the long term. And I don't have that comfort right now.
I don't have that comfort.
Right.
Jared, I'm of the opinion that we need that 5-year plan. We just spent $100,000 plus 130, somewhere in that range for this plan. And you want us to vote on this and bond this out and use up 40% of our bonding capacity. And we don't even know what the next 5 years our plan is. So I would say I am very supportive of the situation, buying this property, potentially preserving it. I'm not a huge fan of adding a huge building on it and adding that expense. I'm not a fan of charging constituents to enter this. And we talked about that, but that is something that was whirling around in the beginning as a affordability to try and cover the cost. But moving forward, I want to see the 5-year plan and understand where we're going to be or what our plan is for 5 years. And if this is included in it, that's great. But I mean, I don't really want to see this again until we see the 5-year plan.
And an appraisal.
I'm sorry?
And an appraisal.
And appraisal.
And appraisal, yes. And that's aside from the financial aspect of what's going on. I mean, this is just common sense. It's logic. Let's see what we paid for this, 5-year plan. Let's see what it looks like. Then we make our assessment and move forward.
I mean, just to be clear, I want this for the town. Like I really want, we took a tour of it. It's fabulous. I think it's going to be a fantastic addition to the town. As the fiduciary body for this town, we have to understand that we can afford this. We can't just go spending money that if an appraisal comes back at like 8 million, we're now figuring out how do we dip into our reserves and all the other components of how do we actually find the revenue to pay for this. And just so that the public knows, for some people that might not understand, the bonding process for the two previous projects we discussed is very different than what the bonding process is for this. That's why we're having a discussion around it. The payment structure for those repayments for that is on the developers through assessed value. We know how it's going to be paid off versus we know how it's going to be paid off here, but it's on us in this case.
Let it fall off.
Yep.
Very
Thank
good. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
Up next is other matters. Counselors have anything?
I had about 45 minutes more remarks to go.
I'm just kidding. Hilarious. All right, up last, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Next regularly scheduled town council meeting scheduled for Monday, August 15th, 2022 at 8 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana open door law.